So good to be seen, and it's even better to see you. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode, a very special episode of The Vegan Lives. I am your host, of course, Francisco Alvarez, and today is a very special episode because we are being joined by one of the biggest forces in the entire planet when it comes to vegan activism. He is Paul Bashir. He is the founder and co-founder and current director of Anonymous for the Voiceless, the organization of animal rights activism. Biggest, most renowned, I would say, all around the world. He will be joining us today by way of Australia. He is literally 14 hours ahead, so this was a daunting task to get together, but we made it happen. So I'm very excited. I have a very particular set of questions asked with every single guest. He will be joining me here shortly. I want to thank everybody that has tuned in. This is very special to me because it's not every day you get to sit down with the founder of the organization that you represent around the world. So this is very exciting for me, as well as most of you, hopefully. I want to ask them very insightful questions and intriguing questions. I want to go ahead and pick his brain as best as we can. So I would very much appreciate it if you guys were to go ahead and chime in. Let me know in the comment section below if you want to ask Paul a question personally. You can go ahead and use the question marks. So I'm just going to go ahead and wait until Paul is here. He's actually typing. Let's see. So again, those just... Hey, there's Paul. There he is. Alrighty. Let's get Paul in here. Dashing Dill asks, is there a LA chapter of Anonymous for the Vegan? There he is. Hey, Paul, how are you doing, man? How are you doing?
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Loud and clear? Okay. Well, Paul, on behalf of, I guess, the entire community, especially AV, I want to thank you for being here today. I know that it's not every day we get to, Microsoft employees get to sit down with Bill Gates, if you will. So I do appreciate you making the time to sit down with us and get to know yourself a little bit better, as well as answer the tough questions, answer insightful questions. And even before you started, we're already receiving questions. We have a question from a lady, I guess, in California, asking if there is a LA chapter, which I'm sure there is, correct? I think Hudson is part of that.
Yeah, there's two chapters there. There's one in Santa Monica, one in Hollywood.
Okay.
And there's there's three actually. There's one in downtown LA as well.
Okay. All right. So I hope everybody gets that question answered, and I hope we can be of service here. So Paul, on behalf of the entire community, again, I want to welcome you to what I'm calling the Vegan Lives. This is basically a reinvented content creation as far as obligatory and mandatory quarantine is concerned. Obviously, we need to reinvent the way we send the message. And so I'm putting together this series of interviews, first exclusively right here on Instagram. But as you obviously can't tell right now, but I am recording this for later use. So if you want a copy of this, I can definitely get you one. So again, thanks for being here. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in because I don't think we have any time to waste. We don't have time to coddle this. So I want to start off by breaking the ice and asking you, Paul, a very important question I've asked every single one of my guests, and that is, I'm a firm believer that we all have aha moments, right? That moment that we realize that veganism will play a huge role in our lives. If you can, and you recall, can you share that anecdote with us and how it happened and how you came to that instant?
Yeah, well, I've said this multiple times, but for me, it was when I saw Gary Yourofsky's speech that it clicked, for me. I think one of the reasons is because Gary is a wordsmith and he has a past in music. Like, before he was doing activism, he was writing rhymes and taking a rap career seriously. And I have that same history, so that's probably one of the reasons why I connected with him so much. And he so perfectly illustrated the severity of this issue. And when I understood how big this issue was, it all just made sense to me that I need to devote my life to this. Because I'm someone who, I'm really bothered by, I've dealt with racism, for example, being Middle Eastern, growing up in Australia, being Lebanese specifically, getting a lot of shit growing up. That's just part of growing up here in this country. So I know what it's like to deal with bigotry. But then when Gary said that there is no greater form of bigotry, essentially, he probably didn't put it in those exact words, but what I've come to learn as a result of the way he put things into perspective for me was that this is the greatest form of bigotry on the planet. And it's not just passing comments. I used to get called names and things like this, and people would judge me, and people would have prejudice towards me. But when it comes to the animals, they're dealing with a whole different kind of bigotry. They're having knives shoved into their throats. I wasn't having knives shoved into my throat for being who I am, being born the way that I am. So, I'm just trying to illustrate how my connection to that came about. But when it was pointed out that this is the largest, longest standing, most violent, the biggest source of cruelty that could ever exist on this planet, that has ever existed on this planet, it just made all the sense to me that it's more than worthwhile for me to dedicate my life to this. And it didn't become clear to me that I would do this to the extent that I'm doing it right now when I first made that connection. But the longer I went down the path of wanting to be an animal rights activist, the more I just devoted my life to it, and it made all the sense for me to devote my life to it full time.
Okay. So let me ask you this. I'm big on quotes. I'm sure you are too. Was there a certain part, a certain set of words, maybe a sentence or two within that speech that just resonated and sort of drove that nail into your heart, saying, this is it. That's what ran my cup over?
There's a few. That bit about Thanksgiving, where he was talking about how non-vegans will fill a dead turkey's ass with bits of bread and then bake that bird in the oven and then eat that bread that's inside. And
I remember
when he called everybody out and said, you eat ass bread, and then you think vegans are weird for eating tofu? It just put it into perspective that no matter how much veganism is mocked in this society, no matter what kind of a response people give to vegans about this issue, that the truth is on the side of vegans. It's on the side of animal rights. So regardless of what the social dynamic is currently, or the climate around veganism, this is the truth. And I've always been a truth seeker, so that was one thing. The other thing was his opening line just really grabbed me. How would you feel if the day of your execution was planned the day you were born? And it just put it into perspective. Being an animal must be the hardest shit on the planet. That's the hardest life of any living creature on this planet. And there's a couple of others, but speaking for animals in the same way you would want to be spoken for if you were in their position is another big one that I still constantly have ringing in my head, because it's just the most perfect way to look at what's going on and to understand your position in all of this.
Okay. No, it definitely solidified. I mean, admittedly, it didn't start me in as far as a plant-based lifestyle, vegan lifestyle, but it definitely drove the nail and put the nail in the coffin. So, yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I admittedly, again, I began my journey as through a medical episode. I was once paralyzed from the neck down. And it wasn't until I started seeing slaughterhouse footage that I just came to my own conclusion that I never want to be a part of that anymore. I don't want to sponsor that with my hard-earned money. And I've been an ethical vegan for 4 years now. I've done activism on behalf of AV here in Puerto Rico, which is where I'm currently located. So I've been doing that for a little over a year now, and I've been having a ton of fun, learning a lot, especially from you. So again, thank you for sharing that, Paul. Let's go on to question number 2. Along with Asal, you are the directors of a worldwide animal rights organization, one that has a chapter arguably in every major country in the world. Many vegans and activists look up to you for guidance, myself included. What have you learned about the importance of being a leader in this community?
I've learned a bunch of things. I think the number one thing is that people need simplicity, and people need simplicity, and that's what I'm trying to focus on in terms of the outreach aspect of what we've been doing. I feel like the last 4 years we've been mastering the outreach element, because that's what we are. We're street activists, and we only focus on one form of activism, which is the cube of truth, which is street outreach, right? Other activists you'll see doing different forms of activism, but whenever you see me, it's street activism. I mean, you've seen me doing other forms of activism maybe a handful of times in the last 4 years, if that. But being as focused and as dedicated as I am to street activism is very important for me as a leader, because I need to know what I'm talking about when it comes to running an organization that specializes in street activism. And now that we've become the biggest street activism organization in the animal rights movement, I feel that it's very important that we bring a simple approach for everybody to adopt, and just make this fight more simple, because everybody is sort of at their wits' end about this and not sure how to win this. How do we find a way out of this, for the animals? And so I feel like my job as a leader is to provide a simple approach to a solution. And I strongly believe that street outreach is the rawest form of communication with non-vegans. So if we can master that, we can master communicating with non-vegans on any platform, in any format. And as a leader, I just feel that it's important that I provide that as best as I can within AV, that platform and that approach. And I've learned a lot of things over the last 4 years. I didn't intend to necessarily run an organization when I became an activist. I was planning to do exactly what Joey's doing and what Gary was doing before both of us, which was to be a solo activist and to do lectures and to be on YouTube. And, that was my goal initially. But then, because the street activism was so effective and AV was a gift, we had to roll it out. Like, it was just an obligation that we had. It's something that everybody needed, and it proved itself to be effective because it blew up so quickly. So through this journey, I've learned a few things, like listening to listening to suggestions that come in, and considering these suggestions and whether they are applicable or not. I've done that. I actually get a lot of criticism for people saying that, like, we don't listen to people's ideas, and if they disagree with us, then we just like ban them from AV or some shit like that. But like, AV has been built off, you know, the way that we've built AV is based off ideas that have come to us. I mean, the idea that me and Asal have only built AV off the ideas that have come into my brain and into Asal's brain only is insane. Like, we've got so many people around us, thousands of volunteers around the world. We've obviously been listening, and the other thing is that we're committed to trialing everything and testing everything. We're not just coming up with theories that are based on hearsay and some psychological study or some sales strategy. You know, it's based on what we have actually tried and tested, what we have done ourselves, and what we know to be true as a result of that. And we also look at the OGs, the people who have been doing it longer than us. And what do they have to tell us? You know, I formed a friendship with Gary Roski over the last year or two, and that's been invaluable. You know, he's now mentoring me in many ways. My friendship with Joey Carstrong is invaluable too, because we bounce off each other a lot. You know, we talk to each other a lot about, you know, these developments in our just the evolution of our thinking around this, and how we take action for the animals effectively. So when I talk about street activism, I'm talking about it from an experienced point of view, and someone who is a student of this first and foremost, you know? So I think that's very important that I continue to do that I listen to what people are saying, but I apply it, and we continue to try. Everything we do has to be tried and true, otherwise we don't do it.
Right. Okay, so maybe I'm actively listening. So two bonus questions, follow-up questions. Number one, when you use the word simplicity, do you mean applying the KISS method that you talked about during your last workshop, for which I used to prepare for this interview? Is that what you mean, sort of?
Well, I mean, KISS is just a reminder. It's not really a method. It's just a reminder
right.
to keep things stupid.
Okay.
Sorry, keep things simple.
Right.
So let's keep things simple, stupid.
Okay.
It's just sort of a reminder. It's, you know, it's just a reminder that the simpler you keep it, the better, because this is simple, isn't it?
It is to me. Unfortunately, a lot of people convolute it and choose to go the complex route when it's simply, listen, you know, it's like you say, this is a black and white issue. There's no gray area. You're with us or you're against us. So second follow-up question is, when you say tried and true, what you mean by that is perhaps you and Asal get together, sort of go on a trial and error basis, see what works, see what sort of off-putting, see what actually works as far as getting people to go vegan, and then you implement it in your workshops. Is that what you meant to say?
Yeah, like for example, what you've seen from me as an outreacher, right? Over the last 4 years is you haven't really seen much outreach. Only in the beginning stages of AV did you see some outreach from me. And then there was a massive gap between then and like some point last year. At some point last year was when I started putting up more outreach from me. But there's a huge gap. There's maybe a 2.5, 3 year gap between there. And the reason why people didn't see much outreach from me is because I was being patient and I was trialing different approaches. And in the beginning, I was more savage. And then I started becoming, you know, more pragmatic and trying to apply different things I was learning from other people, like Earthing Ed mainly. And Joey was, you know, we were friends throughout this whole process, and we would talk. And he was also trialing different approaches. You can see how his approach has changed over time. And I was listening to people who seemed to be more sort of philosophically aligned with how to do this, right? They on paper, it sounded right? So I was doing all these things, and the only way you know something and you can learn something for real is if you put 10,000 hours into it.
Yeah.
And there's no way to fake it. There's no way you can fake it. You can say that you have all of this experience prior to becoming an activist, and that makes you a good activist, but that's not how this works. You have to be out on the streets. You have to get into people's heads. You have to understand how non-vegans tick. You have to speak to the OGs. You know, Gary Yourofsky has done 2,600 lectures, over 2,600 lectures. Thousands of students, thousands upon thousands in a close, intimate setting. He knows something about how non-vegans tick, okay? Because non-vegans are just acting in accordance to their programming. So if you want to understand the programming, how the software works, then you've got to get into their heads and understand how they tick. And so I've learned from Gary, but I didn't just listen to what he said, I also applied it. You know, I went out into the streets and actually did it. And then only up until recently, last year, was when I started to realize what the truth was in terms of doing outreach effectively. And that's when I started to rid some of the ideas we were running with previous to that. For example, you know, thinking that people need to say, yes, I agree with you, or some kind of affirmative, positive response at the end of the interaction, and thinking that that's what it means for someone to go vegan. I mean, it's so ridiculous to think that that's how it works. Some people would definitely say, okay, I'm going vegan as of now. But it makes me feel nervous when they do that, because it makes me think they're just saying that out of, like they're excited about it in this moment. But
sort of like a sugar rush.
Yeah, right. It's like, you know.
So what I'm getting from you, and what I'm getting from you is that you don't feel the need to have affirmation once you believe you've done successful outreach. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I mean, we're pointing out something that people are guilty of. And it's not just a crime. It's the largest crime known to humanity. Right? So why do we think waking someone up to that is going to be a pleasant process? It makes me laugh to think that we would even entertain the idea that it's pleasant. I mean, we're talking about rape, with the largest form of rape on the planet. We're talking about enslavement, the biggest form of enslavement on the planet. Right. And we're talking about kidnapping. We're talking about mutilation. We're talking about fisting animals, fisting them in the ass. We're talking about murder. I mean, we're talking about knives sliding into throats. How pleasant could it possibly be? If you're being effective and you're thinking in terms of effectiveness, how positive and pleasant do you expect it to be if you're keeping it real? I mean, it's insane that we would think it's anything but ugly. The process is supposed to be a very ugly process. People are supposed to leave after talking to you feeling bothered about what they're involved in. Like, I've stopped saying, have a nice day now. Like, I keep making updates, you know, I'm constantly learning, but I've hit a point of confidence now in the principles of the approach. But there's certain things I keep tweaking. Like at the end of the conversation, I don't want to say have a nice day. I don't want you to have a nice day. I want you to have a thoughtful and reflective day. And whilst you're being thoughtful and reflective, I want you to be bothered. I want you to have a horrible day, if anything, because I want you to think about the horrors that you're involved, that you've been participating in your whole life, and trying to justify as well, which is even worse. The fact that you think you can justify this, you should be embarrassed, ashamed. These aren't feelings that are pleasant, but they are natural responses to an injustice. So it's about aligning this. This is why I've been saying, like, this isn't sales. We're not trying to get somebody to sign on the dotted line. I talk about sales. I was the first one to talk about sales in this movement, right? Nobody was talking about sales in terms of outreach before I was. But when I started talking about that, it gave this impression that like we can schmooze people and trick them into taking this seriously. Sorely mistaken. That's not how this works at all. This isn't business coaching. This isn't sports. This isn't life coaching. You're not getting someone perked up, like I was saying, to feel like affirmative and positive and pleasant. This isn't a bowl of cherries. So forming these, like, building rapport and forming these like friendships with people is not going to get them to take an injustice seriously.
Right.
They'll agree with you. They'll agree with your perspective for sure. You know why? Because it's so simple. Of course, how could you not agree with stabbing animals to death is wrong? Pretty fucking agreeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you ask 10 people, and 10 will tell you, yeah, I agree. But then you would proceed to ask him, why the hell then do you not align those values with what you're saying to me? Because you have no reason to lie to me. What do you get out of lying to a perfect random stranger? Nothing. So I will assume, it's like you say in your outreach, I will assume that you're being honest with me. So why the hell are you come home to a burger in your left hand and then you pet your dog with your right hand? Like, you know?
Even more important, you say you're against animal abuse, but then you eat meat, dairy, eggs. You are literally supporting animal abuse. So my point there is that this is exactly how we go about making something, because your original question was how, like, what does tried and true mean? And like, I initially was talking about sales and trying to bring in sales tactics, things that I had learned from sales, to see if it was applicable here. And some things are, but only a very limited amount is. And it's only applicable in terms of communication, and only to an extent is it applicable in that sense as well. And what this is really about is activism. And you will only know this and when you actually do activism. When you're an animal rights activist and you get out into the streets, and that's the cap you wear. I'm an animal rights activist, and you act like one. And that's how you know what works and what doesn't. When you take a fight for justice position, rather than I'm going to say all the right things and then get people to say some kind of affirmative response back to me. And then I'm going to go home feeling fulfilled because I planted some seeds. You know, that's verbally leafleting, and it's also stroking your ego and acting like you're some kind of guru or something, but that's not what activism is. So I learned that myself the hard way by doing 10,000 hours on the streets.
Right. Okay, so again, actively listening, you earlier mentioned it and used the word savage. I used to be a savage. Who's Paul Bashir now compared to when you referred to yourself as savage?
Now I'm
What did you exactly mean by that?
In the start?
Yeah, earlier you said I was a savage. I'm comparing that savage to modern day Paul. Who are you today versus that?
So now I'm more calculated and intelligent, and I'm confident. I'm confident that this approach is actually the approach. You know, and you can only reach that point once you do this for a long time. In the beginning, I was still trialing, you know what I mean? And I had more success in the beginning, but I wasn't getting those affirmative responses that everybody else was using as an indicator as a successful interaction.
Okay.
And we used to have the tallies as well, where we would we would take note of everybody who we thought took veganism seriously, and that was also a distraction because we were focusing on the result as opposed to the process. So in the beginning, I was a savage, but I wasn't thought out. I wasn't as thought out.